Good afternoon and welcome to this week's edition of the People Progressing podcast. And today I have David Gutierrez on. And David and I have been trying to make this work for a long time now. And I am so excited for today, David, to get you on here. This is going to be inspiring for a lot of people. And the work you're doing now is inspiring for a lot of people. And I'm just really excited to have you on. And what I usually do, David, is just have people kind of explain where they grew up, what they like to do as a kid, some of the influences you had as a kid, sports or band or acting, whatever you did as a kid that kind of really was influential in your life and so forth. So I'll let you start with that and we'll get rolling.
Hey, thank you so much, Joe, and I greatly appreciate your persistence and connecting with you and just the value that you bring, the incredible platform you have. So thank you so much. It's my honor to be on your show today, and hopefully I can add some value to and inspiration would be amazing to your awesome audience. So yeah, as Joe said, David Gutierrez. I grew up. I had a very interesting. So to me, it was not interesting. It was normal. My parents divorced when I was two. Nothing unique there. But what was interesting is, especially as I become an adult and seeing divorce from a different perspective. I switched houses every year, and so I lived with my dad for a year, my mom for a year, and that took me literally, all over the place, all over the country. At one point, my dad was in South America. I lived in Colombia, so I was down in South America. And what I would give my parents a lot of credit for is they always gave me the option, probably when I was around 10 or so, that they let me pick. So they said, "Hey, if you want to change this situation, um, we leave it to you to make that." Not that they did not have a contentious relationship with each other, but they allowed me to do that.
Yeah.
And so at one point, when I was in South America, I became very young. I became very calculated in what I perceived to be fair and just. And what I mean by that is I felt an obligation from a very young age to equally split time with my parents. And so at one point when I was in California, probably fifth grade, I had gotten to a program and I'm like, "Hey, I want to stay here for 2 years and do this program." That's pretty awesome that at 10 years old, my middle kid is 10. So I'm now picturing when I give him, when I let him make that kind of decision
Yeah.
at 10, and I don't know if I would, but my parents did. And so I stayed in California 2 years. This was after going Colorado, Colorado, Michigan, California, Oregon, New Mexico, a bunch of different states. And from there, my dad moved to South America. And when I was in South America, as a seventh grader, I calculated, hey, if I do seventh, eighth, and ninth grade here, then I can finish high school in one location, which would go back to California. And so I was projecting these things in like seventh grade and making decisions for my future. And my parents supported that. And really a big driver, you asked what I enjoyed. I love football. I love playing football. I now coach. I'm the head coach for my boys' fifth grade team. Played in college, just really enjoyed football. And so I knew I wanted to stay in one high school to do 3 consecutive years, because leaving in the middle of that would be, if I had an opportunity to play in the future, that would be not a great thing. So it was a really interesting childhood. But I'll tell you, what's the first time I lived anywhere for 4 consecutive years was the Naval Academy. And so
Oh,
I think
wow.
I grew up in a way that made me perfectly suited for the military lifestyle from a perspective of constantly moving. And I'm now, for the first time in my life here in Colorado, facing a future of relative permanence in the location we're currently in. And I'm that to me is completely new. I'm like, man, I wonder if at the 3-4 year mark, I'm going to start getting, the itch to move. And I've just never been in this situation, which I love. And we are an amazing place in Colorado. So long story long, pretty interesting youth, but also very beautiful in the sense that I was given a lot of, I think, unique opportunities to make decisions. And it really
Yeah.
developed who I am and how I view community. Also, moving every year as a kid, I knew I had 1 year to make friends, and that was it. And then I was going to be going somewhere else, except for those times in Colombia and finishing out in California. But that also really formed, I think, a lot of my personality and how much how much passion I have in investing in people and getting uh, depth in relationship very quickly, because to me that's the key, right? A deep relationship,
Yeah.
vulnerability and transparency and honesty has always been important, and so that really frames where we are today as well in on my professional side.
I love that story, especially at such a young age. You made so many prolific decisions. Like you said, you have a 10-year-old son now, and you're kind of thinking, how would he make that decision if I, and stuff. It really kind of set the stage for you. And you went to high school in California. You played football. Did you play any other sports?
No, I had growing up, I played baseball. I played I had played soccer, especially down in South America. I mean, there's no
Yeah,
football well, they play football.
yeah, 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 yeah.
There's no American football down there. But I really was just passionate about once I got to high school, I spent the rest of the off season doing things that would just prepare me for football. So a lot of weightlifting, a lot of sprinting, a lot of things that directly related to football. And so I kind of dropped everything else from an activities perspective, sports perspective, and really focused on football. So it which now is challenging. I married a very athletic woman. She played women's professional football, but she's also a basketball stud, and she's just a general stud. And so now, when we compete, she kicks my butt in basketball and all kinds of other other sports. I should have been more well rounded so that I could compete with my wife. That's where I'm going with that. But and one point I want to make that when you said it, one of the conversations my wife and I have, and this is to all the parents out there, I think we severely underestimate what our kids can do. And I think it's
Yeah,
having a huge impact on their growth, their maturity. And I would just ask, let's just be conscious of the way we talk to our kids and the decisions we do let them make. Because, we were talking about, hey, would we put our kids on a plane by themselves to go somewhere? And nowadays,
yeah,
would way more safe, way more secure. A lot of parents like, no, I would never. And I was talking to my wife, and it hit me. I'm like, honey, I was flying internationally to a foreign country by myself multiple times a year, back and forth, as just a regular thing. I started
yeah,
doing that at 5 years old, and my parents didn't. There was no hesitation. That was just the nature of, my dad is in New Mexico, my mom is in Michigan, and I would spend the holidays with whoever I wasn't living with. So like that was just a normal
normal
thing.
thing. Yeah,
And I turned out, I mean, depends who you talk to. I turned out okay.
yeah.
But it's just an interesting thing that we don't empower our children, and it has a very, very real impact on how they grow up today and
Yeah,
how resilient they are.
I can't agree more. And I also say this a lot. I work with a lot of business leaders who ask me questions about the younger generation coming up into the workforce. And I say, here's the one thing I can tell you is what I think really has happened over my 30-year career as a teacher and a coach. What I saw was that as the career went longer, so as I was getting into the year 28, 29, 30, what I really noticed was how adults started shielding kids
Mm,
from adversity. They were taking adversity away from kids
hmm.
and not allowing the kids to learn from that adversity because they would shield it from them. And I think that's a big thing nowadays too. I really think it's important that kids have adversity.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to wish bad things on anybody, but man, it's such a great learning tool if you use it right. And I just saw that happening a lot where the adults would come in and just shield their kids from it. But so what a great point you just made. I want to get into, David, your next step, your next journey after high school was the Naval Academy. How did that opportunity come about for you, first of all?
Yeah, I'll be completely honest. So I was a diligent student, got good grades, was in the AP and the IBs and all that kind of stuff, and that was something that was always very important to me. But it was football. I The Naval Academy and West Point were um two of the two biggest schools from a Division I perspective opportunity that were paying me any attention. Right, there were some D2 schools and some some of the like a Dartmouth or something like that that were showing interest. But I really was passionate about football. And so when I didn't know anything about the Naval Academy, but when I started talking to those coaches, I was like, man, this is an opportunity to play Division I. They're on they play Notre Dame every year. The Army Navy game is great. I mean, at that time Navy was independent, meaning they weren't tied to a conference, and so they were playing some really big teams.
Yeah, yeah.
And back then there were guys like, and I'm a big Raiders fan, so you had Napoleon McCallum and different guys that actually went from Navy and were playing pro, and so it just it was really football that drove me to hone in on the Naval Academy. And I would not suggest this to anything, but I'm also a man of faith. I love Jesus, and I think things happen, and we're put in positions. And the Naval Academy, by the grace of God, this I got in, but there was the only place I applied, and I do not recommend that. Right, I do not recommend.
Yeah.
I kind of just laser focused on getting into there, and everything else fell aside, and I didn't even apply to any other colleges. And so I was very fortunate to get accepted. But I just think it was the path, right? It was very clear to me, and that's where I wanted to go, and it worked out well.
That's amazing. My next door neighbor growing up, my one of my heroes growing up was a guy named Andy Ponciego, who was, I think he's all-time leading tackler or second or something to that, for the Naval Academy. He was a linebacker. He was third team All-American linebacker there. And so I grew up a Navy football fan as well, because
Nice.
when Andy went away to play, I was his biggest fan. He also played baseball there too. He was a really
This is a stud.
heck of an athlete. Yeah, but
Yeah.
he played with Napoleon back in those days.
Oh, nice.
And their Army Navy game back that day, we're getting off track here, but the Army Navy game, I think his junior senior year was at the Rose Bowl in California.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah. So I got to go to my first Army Navy football game last year in New York.
Nice.
Me and my buddies went to that. It was a bucket list item, and it doesn't disappoint. So if anybody was thinking about doing that, I highly recommend it. I want to get into mindset now, David, because you've already mentioned a couple things. The discipline mindset you had to get into an academy takes an amazing skill set, not only with your academics, your athletics, but the discipline that it takes to get in there. And once you're there, the discipline it takes to get through there. When you first went there, I have to imagine it wasn't easy. You're coming all the way across the country from California. You're playing football at a Division I level, which is a challenge. You're going to the Naval Academy, which is a challenge within itself, because you have to go to a boot camp first before you start school. What was your mindset there? I mean, was it something that was kind of scary for you, or did you dive deep into it and just get after it, or how did that go?
Yeah, I mean, I was a big baby. I'll tell you what. It's funny. I think there were certain elements of going away from my family that that I had been conditioned to for forever. It did not make it easier, because I think when you go into that environment and you get homesick and it's very natural. And then they also there's I don't know if they still do this, but so you go through 6 weeks of plebe summer. I believe it's 6 weeks. I'm it's been a while since I've done that, but you show up and you have the challenges of, it's interesting because you're running a lot, right? You're running a lot. That wasn't really my thing, long distances. And so I went from 225-ish when I showed up down to 185, which is not great for football. So you're trying to figure out how you keep on weight and how you do balance this. And really there's no balance. Like, you're committed to getting through this 6 weeks and moving on. And so there was some, what they do well is you're so busy that I didn't really even have time. It's so funny how much it ingrains. I don't even know why this memory just popped in my head, but I remember I would say my prayers at night, and it was so like all the sirs and the yes sir, no sir, all this stuff. I would find myself praying like, and God, sir, I just want to thank you, sir. And I'm like, this is how much this is
Yeah.
inundated my life is crazy. But they keep you super busy, and then at the 6 week point, there's a parents' weekend. Your parents come out, your girlfriend come out, whatever. And it was I don't know if they still do this, but back when I was there, you go out, you see your parents, you come back, and what they did is they played Christmas music, and they made us stand in a circle and sing Christmas songs. And what they said was, next time you see your family,
Wow.
is you'll be singing these songs. And so everybody's in a circle crying, like, oh, just bawling because it's such a mind game.
Yeah.
And now it's hilarious, right? I think about it, it's hilarious. But back then, it's just your world is so small. Your perspective is so small that you're just so focused on, I was a high school kid. And I mean, it's great, right? Like you focus on your grades and football, academy, similar. And you just, so that is such a big part of it's an overblown part of your life to, I just want to be at home. Well, you grow out of that. But in that phase, in that freshman year, it's just, man, they just play a lot of games and they break you down. But the intent is to build you back up, right? The intent is
Yeah.
to give you
Yeah.
some resilience, to help you to be able to manage some of these things. And so I remember my first phone call. Like I remember my mom we were talking about the other day. She's like, this used to be dial. You had a phone card, and it's a bank of phones, no cell phones. And I heard my mom's voice, and I just didn't say anything, because I was emotional, I was crying. And so the parents were warned ahead of time, hey, your kid's going to call, they're going to be upset. A lot of them are going to want to quit. And so you just really, to my parents' credit, that was never really an option. Like, oh, just come home, just come home. No, like, hey, stick it through. You'll be fine. It's going to be great. You spent so much time to achieve this goal. Why would you come home now? Like all these different things, right? There wasn't this, hey, you can always come home. I never had the sense that I could just go home. Although my mom would have welcomed me, it wasn't an option. So I think that really forms your mindset, right? It forces you to, okay, I have this adversity. I feel sad. I have these emotions. Football's hard. I'm losing weight, like all the things. What do you do about it now? What do you do about it now? And I'll tell you one very transformative thing for me. Um, two occasions, similar thing happened. They brought all the students, all the freshmen into an auditorium. So there's 1,000 kids in there. And they said, hey, raise your hand if you're a valedictorian of your class. And hands went up. I was not, but hands went up all around you. And they're like, look around. Who still feels special? Like, okay. And the same thing happened in football. The coaches brought us in and they're like, hey, how many of you guys were team captains of your high school teams? And everybody in that room raised their hand.
Yeah.
And they're like, and they said, look around, welcome to Navy football. And it wasn't so much to beat you down. It was more to say you are now amongst people who have met or surpassed any goal that you had set through high school. So it's time to step up. It's time to step up your game. And I appreciated being in that room because I was like, oh, okay. I'm not special anymore.
Yeah.
Like you got to earn it now. And this is I'm surrounded by a bunch of absolutely incredible human beings. And so it's time to step up. If you don't have a sense of resilience in that room, I could see where you would want to quit. I'm not special anymore. Well, that's just a great place. That is a beautiful place early in life to learn you're not that special.
Right.
You have to really dive in and build yourself and grow constantly because there's always somebody ahead of you. And what you should do is seek that person out so that you can become more like them.
Yeah.
That was a lesson I learned pretty quick.
Well, I want to go the other way because I guarantee you there was people right and left dropping, quitting.
Tons of people.
So what kept David there? You mentioned it, calling your mom, crying in that circle, crying. I got goosebumps thinking about this. You got all those things, adversity hitting you, losing weight, haven't started football yet, and all these things coming at you, and you're probably looking around left to right. That guy's quitting. That guy's quitting. That guy's quitting. Man, it would be easy to quit and go home. And what made you stay? What made you be the guy that stayed?
I think I'll tell you, there's two things. One, I started forming amazing relationships. So my business partner, Stu, who couldn't
There
join
you
us today,
go.
which is probably better for the podcast because he's terrible. I'm just kidding. He's an amazing human being. I love him. But I started meeting incredible people, and I was in a community and we were suffering together. So when you suffer together, there's something about that, whether it's football, whether it's military training, whether it's a real estate deal gone bad, whatever it is, you're in a startup and you're in this challenge. The people that you're around in that moment, oftentimes bonds are formed that just don't happen in good times. I'll tell you a great book, Tribe by Sebastian Younger. Great book, phenomenal. But it talks about the power of communities, especially in struggle. To the point, he highlights some examples of extremes where countries were in war and it was bad and they're getting bombed and all that. They come out of that war and within that generation, they're like, man, remember during the war how awesome it was? Well, they're being bombed and they're being shot at and they're being threatened, but the human just ability to connect and form community is so powerful, and we thrive in it and we desire it. And so there's an element of that. But there's also, like, you just have to sometimes step back and be like, okay, what are my goals? Like, what am I really doing here? And is this something that I want to continue to do? Yes. There are a number of times where I thought I wanted to quit. But either my friends were like, dude, why would you quit? Like, this is awesome. This is fine. No big deal. Or, you just really look back and you're like, okay, if I project forward, I think this is a great exercise. So I feel more now. I sometimes think about the guys that quit and I'm like, man, I wonder if because I know I've talked to enough guys to know that project forward a number of years, there's a huge sense of regret.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the nefarious thing about quitting. You think it's an out, but what you really have done is oftentimes you've dug yourself a hole that you'll continue to revisit potentially for a lifetime.
Yeah.
And so, for example, a great example is my wife asked me, why is it so important for you? I kept volunteering to go to Iraq or Afghanistan. And she said, why is this so important to you? And I told her, I said, well, one, it's what it's about. Like, it's why I serve. Two, this is, I feel like I want to be a part of that. This is what we signed up for. And so this is just a part of being military service, but almost equally as important. I said, when I think of myself at a VFW, when I'm 65, 70 years old, just sitting around talking with the guys and the gals, and I'm the guy that I can't relate because I didn't go. And I don't want any of your listeners to misread this. There's no judgment in that. This was
Right.
all internal to me. I don't
Right.
care if people served or didn't serve, or went or didn't go. It was all about me and me sitting in that seat saying, yeah, I had an opportunity, but I didn't do it. I knew at 20 something years old that my 65-year-old self would feel a ton of regret, and that was not worth that was not a price I was willing to pay.
Wow.
And so there's a lot that goes into, so the same thing with the academy. Like there was a price I was not willing to be, project out 5 years from when I quit, the guy that, for myself, the guy that just didn't push through, because I
Right.
knew I had worked so hard to get to this point. Why would I quit?
Right.
Didn't make sense to me.
Powerful. And it goes, this is amazing. When I was a coach, and I still do, in fact, I have some shirts and hats made right now that say fear, regret. And I've had some players
I love
actually
that.
tattoo that on them, on their body before, because my thing was the same way. When I was in college, I wanted to graduate in 4 years and get drafted by a major league team. Well, I had to set up a process that I wanted to follow so that if I did achieve that goal, or if I didn't achieve that goal, I wouldn't have any regret.
Yeah.
So I always tell people you got to win the process because you're fearing regret. Because it's the same thing. I've told this story before. I got to tell it again just because of your story. I took my dad when he was 84. My dad's 88 now, and he was in the Marines. but he was in the Marines because him and his buddy went to college and they both ran out of money. Well,
Yeah.
his buddy went to the Navy. My dad went to the Marines. His buddy became a Navy pilot and flew commercially after he got out of the Navy, flew commercially for his career. So I take my dad to see this guy at 84 years old. He's laying in a bed. He can't move. It's on his last days. And he looked over at my dad and he said, I just wish I could fly again.
Mm.
And it hit me like a ton of bricks. When I'm 84, am I going to say, I just wish I could coach again? Do I wish do I wish I could just help someone grow and progress one more day? And I honestly say I can't. But I say that story because when you're 84, you don't want, like you just said, you don't want to have regrets on things that you could have done.
Mm-hmm.
What a great story. And what that really fueled you to get through that. What I say to you is this. What I ask you next is this, because you got me going here. How did you develop that at such a young age? Most people at that age can't see that far into the future. They're so into the, I coached and taught for 30 years. I've been around 18 and 19-year-old people my whole life, and it's like most of them can't see that far ahead to make that decision on that. What do you think that gave you that wherewithal to do that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I also don't want to paint a picture that I'm something that I'm not.
I know you.
You
I
know,
know
there
you.
there was
You're
there was
very humble. I know.
definitely a lot of struggle.
Yeah.
It's funny
Yeah.
because
Sure.
you highlighted something, and we talk about regret. It's funny how there are certain things in my life that I did quit, or even like there are times when I like cheated on an exam, right? And I still can remember those times with regret and be like, why did I do that? Like and
Yeah.
so those things stuck enough that I think I just nobody's perfect, and you're gonna have, I'm thinking about this kid that just quit the football team that I coach. And I want to talk to him, and I'm trying to figure out how to talk to him and be like, hey, buddy, he's 10, he's like my kid, he's fifth grade. Actually, he's younger. He's a fourth grader, big kid. But I just want to talk to him and be like, hey, man, quitting just gets easier. That's what happens. It just gets easier. And the first time you do it, the second time's easier. And then and you really have to fight to get back to a place where you're not going to quit.
100%.
And so for me, I think a lot of it was I faced some really interesting, significant adversity that now as a parent, I look back and I'm like, holy cow, like I can't imagine putting my children. This is not an indictment on my parents at all, but my dad, God rest his soul, he he was married 5 times. And so in the midst of those 5 marriages, there's a lot of like for a young kid, there's a lot of when you go live with your mom, you come back and there's a new stepmom, like that is a pretty traumatic thing. And it really forced, I think it created in me a personality that I was able to, not necessarily in a good way, I had to deal with it later, but I was able to compartmentalize things and just keep going, because it was out of a sense of this is the reality, and got to press. So there was some of that built in adversity. Again, when you shelter your kids from adversity, they lose the ability to develop this muscle. And it's really, man, I admonish parents, because the way it manifests in the future, I'm not surprised suicide rates are going up. I'm not surprised depression goes up. I'm not surprised anxiety goes up, because the kids don't know how to deal with anything. And this is not just David. This is scientific backed data. So to answer your question directly, I think a lot of things happen that really I was able to compartmentalize and press. And where that helped me in my career, I am now processing it, but there were a lot of times when I'd show up to a new job and felt completely ill prepared for that job, whether
Yeah.
it was command, whether it was flight school, whatever it was. I honestly had very strong beliefs in my mind that I was not going to make it through. And wherever that came from, I don't know. But then I'd have to literally deconstruct that. I remember this happened up to my 20-year point in my career. I'm going to be a command. I'm going to be the CO. Okay. I'm not qualified to do this. The last CO was awesome. Okay. Let's deconstruct this. Let's intentionally address the cognitive distortions that I'm dealing with. Let's seriously address, like, am I truly not qualified to do this? Is that a logical conclusion? The Navy has trusted me with a command. All these people have said, yes, you are qualified. What is the lie that's living in my mind to tell me that I'm not?
Right.
And so how do I address that? And so you mentioned coaching. I also coach, and I love it. And to your point, I was just telling somebody the other day, I don't want to retire ever. I can envision myself at 90 years old pouring into a younger generation and just trying to give them a little bit of this life journey to be like, hey, man, it's okay.
Yeah.
Here's what I did in this situation. I surely experienced this thing that you're currently in, and I made it through. That's the power of community too, because you're able to rely on that resource.
Yeah.
And so it just, I think that people, we talk about kids, but each of us has more capacity to deal with adversity than we give ourselves credit for. And if you'll just take a second, and there's two things you can do. One, just take a second and really be intentional about it. Put your phone away, give yourself 5 minutes of silence and be like, okay, are these things going through my head truth or lies? Wow, that's a lot of lies. I feel much better. Cool. It's great. And the other thing is turn your phone back on and call somebody. Just call somebody and be like, look, man, I can't do life by myself. I'm hearing these voices. I'm hearing these lies. I'm telling myself this. Can you help me? Is this true or not? And the power of being able to pick up the phone and say, I'm struggling in my marriage. I have an addiction. I beat my kids. I don't feel worthy. To know that you can at least pick up the phone and call somebody to have that conversation already alleviates 90% of the stress and angst of that. And then that last 10% is that person being like, dude, completely normal. I had those thoughts yesterday. This is what I did. Let's go grab a beer. Let's have a coffee. Right. And just the comfort of that can get you past so much. But we're living in this American lie of independence and I don't need anybody. No, you do. That's this whole idea of being you're pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, and men are lone rangers and all this kind of stuff, dude. Lone Ranger had Tonto, right? Like you need to get past this idea that you've got all the answers, and we need to get into communities and put ourselves in a position to be surrounded by amazing human beings, because that adds so much life and beauty to who we are and who we can become.
Yeah. I love it. Wow, there's so much to unpack there, Dave. Here's the thing. I did some research on what you're talking about. And one of the research articles I looked at said that we have as people, we have between 80 to 90,000 thoughts a day. Then another research article I read said, no, it's between 7 and 8,000 because they've lumped a bunch of those together. So whatever it is, we have a lot of thoughts a day. Yeah. But the percentage of those thoughts that are negative is like 88 to 92% of those thoughts are negative every day. The little man coming at you. And I talk about that all the time. And what you just brought out, which is what I try to teach to people too, is be aware of them. Because most of the time we're not aware of those thoughts. We can't fight them off. You just gave a great example of how you have become aware of them and how you can fight them off. Love it. Very, very powerful there. And as you went through your football career at Navy, I'm sure there was probably times, with adversity and stuff there, and all that. Let's get into when you graduated, because this is going so fast. How many deployments did you have? How many deployments over into a war territory did you have?
Yeah, so I had on the ground, I had one long year-long deployment, and then I had a number of multiple more. So I did intel, so I can't get too many details in this, but I did a bunch of shorter deployments on different Navy platforms, submarines, and different platforms of the like that that I did throughout my career that were, mission based. And so those were all from the sea. And those, I think that was probably 6, 7, 8 times that I did those types of missions. So I was actually pretty, uh, very blessed in the sense of when I started having kids, a lot of the opportunities for me to go do stuff on the ground were drying up just by where I was in my career and rank and that kind of stuff. So when I look back now, I think the number of times I wanted to raise my hand and go would have drastically declined once I had kids. I didn't have context for that at the time that I was deploying. Most of my deployments were happening earlier in my career, but I'm very grateful that things worked out on that timeline. And so I was fortunate enough to probably do 6, 7, 8 different deployments. The longest one being that year-long deployment in Iraq.
What are some things you took from that?
Man, I tell you, it's funny, and that book I mentioned adds some context, but and it's people can misconstrue this, and I want to be clear, and I tell my kids this all the time. I'm like, look, war is absolute pure evil, and it's terrible, and it's oftentimes the loss of life is just simply um it's inexcusable. That being said, my time in Iraq was probably one of the best times of my life, and it was absolutely, most people say command is like the pinnacle of the career. My time in Iraq was the pinnacle of my career and the other deployments that I did. And it's because you're in a situation that again, it's the community piece of it.
Right.
You're all in this situation where you're getting shot at, blown up. And I worked with the unit I was attached to was an EOD unit, the explosive ordnance disposal guys. And so, you're going out, you're looking for and blowing up IEDs, and again, it's very dangerous, particularly for those guys leaving the vehicle and doing what you got to do for that job. And then the nature of the job, right? I mean, you're dealing with highly explosive things. So but that community is an amazing group of individuals, and you're all embracing the camaraderie of the mission that you're doing. And there's something to that that's very, very special. There's something, you're away from home. So this is your family now, right? You're thousands of miles from home, in a foreign land, doing things that are not normal human activities.
Yeah.
And so there's these bonds that form, and there's this commonality, and there's a realness to the relationships that is very special. And those are the things I remember, right? Like, I don't remember a lot of the missions. I mean, I flew a lot, because the area that I was responsible for was called M&D North. And so it was basically from Baghdad all the way to Syria, and it was a big swath of land. So I was traveling, convoying throughout the country, and I don't remember a lot of the missions. I don't remember any of the flights. I don't remember, a lot of the things that we did, but I do remember the relationships. I remember I'm still talking to guys that I met there, and just the relationships and the camaraderie, and that's what's built in adversity. When you're in a highly stressful, adverse, environment, those are the things that stick out. And I think that's why people thrive. And they, quite frankly, they speak very highly of their time in those environments. A lot of people. Now there's a dark side to that, right? There's PTSD, there's loss of life, I lost a lot of buddies. That stuff is also that's the evil part of war. And there's those things you have to deal with as well. But there is something to be said I would be lying if I did not say I loved my time there.
Amazing. I want to connect this purpose. You said you were wanting to go do your deployments and do that. There has to be a deeper purpose inside you for that. What is that deeper purpose that makes you want to go serve that and serve the people of Iraq, serve the people of our country? What's that deeper purpose?
Yeah, I'll tell you two things that two things I've been passionate about my whole life are uh, service and leadership. And so the military offered a very unique opportunity I mean, you're serving your country, like the whole, your whole career, one word that runs throughout, and that is a great descriptor of what you're doing, is service, right? Like, thank you for your service. I mean, everybody said service is just built into that career. And so it was a natural, it was a very natural career that fed a purpose that I've always felt, which was serving. And again, like I was looking at getting out when we were stationed here 10 years ago in Colorado. I love Colorado. Colorado is amazing. I mean, after we get off, I'm going to go fly fish for 2 hours because I love to fly fish. And there's a river 10 minutes away. You can go snowboarding, all the beauty that we're surrounded by. I love this state. So I almost got out, but my natural inclination, all the places I was applying were all service oriented. I was applying to Denver Fire. I was applying to, very service oriented, uh, careers. So that's important. And then leadership. I'll tell you, there's very few things in this life that are as impactful as a good leader.
Yeah.
And I'm not suggesting I'm a good leader, but I gave a lot of effort to develop myself to pour into anybody who was under my command, or my, that I had positional authority over. I poured into trying to be a resource for them and somebody that was an advocate. There's also the other side of that, right? I was also held them accountable to very high standards. And when they failed, I was also the first one to be there to be like, hey, this was a failure. I'm going to point it out. We have these are the standards. This is where you didn't meet them. What are we going to do about it?
Yeah.
How can we move from this into, and I'll tell you that in and of itself can be so powerful. It changed someone's life.
Yeah.
Because it changed mine. And so those two purposes are what, and that's what drives me today, right? In the Kinetic Man and the things we're doing. I was describing to a group of coaches. I said, look, I feel a responsibility outside of the business aspect of what we're doing. I feel a responsibility to pour into these men who are in their own right are all incredible men, but to pour into them, to show them, one, that I love them, two, that someone's in their corner, three, that they're in a community of other like-minded men who care, and then four, ideally to lead in a way that they see there's a different path.
Yeah.
And that path can also lead to purpose accomplishment, goal accomplishment,
Right.
and living a life that we want to live.
Yeah.
And so leadership and servant, you tie a servant leader. I don't think there's very many more powerful things in this world than a true servant leader.
Yeah. And I really feel that there's a leadership void in our country, and we need 100% more.
Agree.
We need more. Wow. I knew this was going to be good. This has blown me away. I have to ask this question.
I hope I didn't disappoint.
No, because we could keep going on forever. I have so many questions for you, but I want to ask you this question. It's really intriguing to me. Where'd your faith come from? You had situations as a kid where mom and dad divorced, you're living here, you're living there, you're living there. You had every chance in the world to be bitter.
Mm.
And you chose to be better. And the faith that you have with some of that adversity you face as a kid, where did your faith come from?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I grew up, when I lived with my mom, we would go to a Catholic church. When I lived with my dad, there was no church of any kind. And I did not, for me, the Catholic church was very, growing up, it was kind of the traditional, like, hey, we're going to church. You're going to stand, cry, do all the traditional things of the Catholic church, which I think are beautiful things and I love, but it didn't hit me at a soul level. I wasn't mature enough. It was more of an obligation that I did with my family. And when I moved to South America, there's a heavy missionary presence there. And I somehow, I still don't understand why or who it was, but somebody, a servant leader, took interest in this kid and they saw something, so they started investing in me, and then that got me into church. And my where I will give my dad credit is he didn't hamper
Yeah.
me going.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting that you asked that question, I haven't thought about this for years. Before I graduated from the Naval Academy, there's a couple of days, there's an entire week. It's called commissioning week. It's awesome. You have Herndon, you have all these different events. Your family typically comes out for a number of days. Well, my dad came out and my mom came out and some friends. And my dad and I were walking by the water, and he asked me that same question, which I find really interesting and curious that you asked that. Because he's like, where did this faith come from? Because I was very open with it. And from, I was probably around seventh grade where I started getting this pull, and it just developed through college. And I'm like, Dad, I don't know, man. God has always had his hand in my life. And I didn't see the way I grew up as a particularly burdensome or bitter occasion. It was an opportunity and again, I didn't have the maturity to frame it this way,
Yeah.
but as I look back, I was not an unhappy kid. I was a very happy person. And I just think I started seeing God's hand in so many different things, even through my military career. Some certain things happened in my career that nobody could plan for. Nobody could plan for, but it really progressed me on a path. I almost was sabotaging my career, and God was like, nope, this is what we're going to move this piece, and you're going to go this way, and it's going to benefit. And that's what happened. And so as I kind of reflect back, I just see this presence constantly. And I think I've always just been built to seek that depth of relationship. And there's no relationship that has more depth than trying to fathom, for me, the God of this universe and Jesus. And so it just is something that's always kind of been there on the fringes. And then it really, in South America, I think with the influence of that community, the missionary community, really started, seeds were planted, and they're still blooming to this day.
Amazing. I want to go into what you're doing now, David. I want to get into the Kinetic Man is really where I want to go. I know you've done some other stuff. You can kind of explain that and how that evolved into the Kinetic Man. Why don't you explain a little bit to our listeners what the Kinetic Man is and what your purpose is with the Kinetic Man?
Yeah. So Stu and I we were Naval Academy roommates and both retired last year, June 22. We had started a couple businesses, some real estate businesses, and there was two things that were very common in all the things we thought we wanted to do. One was giving. So our real estate businesses are called Storehouse 310, which is the 310 is Malachi 310, which is the tithing principle in the Bible. And so we always knew we wanted to build businesses that gave back, that we always committed at a minimum 10% of our proceeds of our profit to causes that we're passionate about, which typically revolve around human trafficking, anti-human trafficking movements and veteran causes. I think, to make a long story short, we were always looking through our businesses to also build community. And so we had joined a couple masterminds, and the masterminds, God bless them, they're great masterminds, but they were not, we wanted to get like a very intensive experience where we brought people together and we were diving deep. And so as we started looking at our own lives and kind of the path we were on with our families and not being present and always having this thing, I'm picking up a cell phone, but always being tied into the cell phone for a real estate deal or whatever. And our kids kind of suffering from that, from a lack of our influence and our presence, our wives suffering from that. And I say suffering, and a lot of people will be like, oh, that's a bit extreme. It may be a slow trickle suffering, but at some point it's going to come out, and ideally you address it before it's catastrophic, like a divorce, right? But we saw ourselves heading down that path, and we just looked at our network of senior military officers and entrepreneurs, and we're like, man, what are we seeing in the mirror, and what are we seeing around us? We're seeing, a lack of men living their purpose. We're seeing a lack of men living in adventure and not having fun or friends. And we're seeing a lack of deep, meaningful relationships. amongst these men. So what can we do about it? Well, and very selfishly, we're like, hey, let's just start our own mastermind. Like, we really try to find the mastermind that had all that, and couldn't find it. And I think that was very, again, a God thing that was like, hey, just create it. Like, you got to start a business. If you're not afraid to start a business, just go start it, see what happens. And so that's where the Kinetic Man came from. We created for the last 18 months, 2 years, we had been iteratively developing a curriculum. We have 9 months of focus on family, friends, faith, financial freedom, giving, like all these different things that we really focus on. And we have about 35 men now, in the tribe, and we dive deep. We do that. One of my favorite things we do is hot seats. And it's not, most of our things are recorded. This is not. We go in there and we're like, hey, every dude, here's a schedule. You have 30 minutes, and it is this. The ground rules are, you're going to be vulnerable and you're going to be honest. And we're going to talk about what's really going on in your life. And I'll tell you, it is magic. And the rest of the guys in that call, nobody's judging. Most people are like, oh yeah, me too. Me too.
Yeah.
And they just pour into each other's lives, and it's super, super powerful. And a lot of these guys come in the group saying things like, hey, how many friends do you have? I have 0. No friends. I literally don't hang out. I work out of my family. And they leave this, they have not left. They're now in the group, and they're now like, man, I've got 35 dudes that I trust implicitly. I've got a tribe. I've got friends. I've got guys that want to be with me and I want to be with. And it doesn't hurt that all these guys are like, I mean, we got amazing human beings in this group. And I was joking with a business owner the other day. I was just talking to this guy. I didn't know him, and he ended up being the owner of his business. And we were talking about the group, and I was like, man, I honestly think if I wasn't a founder, I don't know if these guys if they would actually invite me into the group because they're so awesome. And it's just a fascinating group of men. But the commonality is we all want to be better husbands. We all want to be better dads. And for those of us that has kids, not everybody has a kid. Not everybody has a wife. And there's some, divorcees in there, and they're looking for what they want in the future. And then they all want to be better businessmen and leaders. And so you get those 3 things that all these guys want to be better at. It's magic. It's magic.
Man. So you've been doing this for about a year now.
Yeah, 2 years. Yep,
2 years, and it's growing. How can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of ways. Stu and I are both very active. His name is Stuart Grazier. We're very active on LinkedIn. He also does Facebook stuff. I don't spend a lot of time on Facebook. We have a website, thekineticman.com. So it's thekineticman.com. On there, you can see we have a retreat coming up in September here, 27th through 29th. I'm not sure when this will air, so that might be in the past. But there's a retreat at the end of the month that's open to anybody to just kind of get people up in the mountains. And we have guest speakers. We have a cook comes in. We do adventure. We do the things that I'm talking about are missing, right? We do adventure. We have a ton of fun, and we get real deep. And that's something that men can get exposure to what we're about through retreat. There's also information on the mastermind on that website. And I love talking, if as your listeners probably gather at this point. So if you reach out to me on LinkedIn, man, I'll send you a link, and we'll jump on a call and just get to know each other.
That's
so those
awesome.
are all very effective ways to get us.
Okay, so we've almost been an hour. And I have 3 more questions for you, and there might be some questions after that. So I'm just prefacing that now.
Sounds good.
I wrote a book called The 3 Ps, Finding Your Purpose, Perspective, and Passion. And I ask every guest I have on my podcast those 3 questions. What is your purpose in life? You kind of already said it.
Yeah.
But
my purpose, honestly, now is to serve these men to the best of my ability. That is, there was a transition from the military out, and it's a very hard transition. Everybody goes through it. I thought it was going to be easy for me because we had these things going on. It's not about your next job. It's not about, that's all important stuff. Most people transition, it doesn't have to be from the military, any transition. There's a sense of loss, and there's ideally a sense of growth. And for most of us from the military, it's exactly your point. It's that purpose. I've lost my purpose. Well, I
Yeah.
realized the serving purpose is still very much alive. It just looks different now.
Mm-hmm.
And so me pouring into, whether it's as a coach one-on-one or especially into the Kinetic Man, the group, to me, it is so fulfilling to see men rectify their marriages, their relationships with their kids, to just change their perspective and to ultimately be better. That is 100% my life purpose at this point.
Love it. And it shows. What
Thank
you're
you.
doing is amazing. I skip over perspective. I'll tell you why in a second. But what's your passion? What's things you love to do?
Yeah. My passion in all honesty is for myself and for these men to find a level of self-awareness that we just I did not realize was possible. And why self-awareness is so key is a great example. The reason I'm going fishing after we get off this call is not just because it's a hobby. For me, it is something that, no kidding, as I'm out there by myself throwing a fly and fish are coming up, for me personally, like I'm also in a very active state of worship in that, right?
Wow.
And it's such a life-giving thing that I do that now it has to be built in. Working out is something similar. Reading the Bible is something similar. Most of us we lack the self-awareness to know what truly gives us passion and purpose, because we don't give ourselves any time away from devices, away from our family, away from, it's okay. I'm telling you, all you men out there, you women as well, especially you women, you moms out there, it is okay that your life is not 100% about your kids. It sounds terrible for a lot of us to hear that,
Yeah. Yeah.
but you're truly denying the essence of who you are if everything revolves around somebody else and you never take the time to become self-aware enough to know what gives you energy, to feed you, to know your love language. How many of you, we just took our men in the group, no kidding, we forced them to take the love language test to know their own love language.
Yeah.
And we dive even deeper than that, right? And so in the kinetic part of Kinetic Man, you do something about it. So you become self-aware about the things that give you life, that you are put on this earth for the purpose, the way you serve, the way you contribute, and you identify that, and then you do something about it. And so for me, that step of self-awareness is a huge passion, because it unlocks a door to so many you may leave a career once you achieve some of this, just a little bit of self-awareness, you may leave a career and go do something entirely
Yeah.
different. And how amazing is that?
Oh,
It's great.
well, it's huge. What got me into this, David, and I knew this would bring up more. And I say this basically on every podcast, and I keep reiterating it. 70% of Americans are disengaged at work. 85% of
100%.
those 70 say because of the leadership they work for, because they're not working in a purpose. They're not working in something that gives them meaning. Um, Beautifully said. And I say purpose and passion first, because I think most of the time your purpose and passion equal each other. They support each other. And what holds it together, the glue that holds it together, is your perspective.
Yeah.
And you have things that come at you all the time in life trying to take you out of whatever that perspective is, to take you out of your purpose and passion. What is that perspective you have on life that holds those two things together?
Yeah, and I think this one really goes back to faith. It's funny, my daughter is 12 and I was doing carpool this morning, taking her and her friend, and one of my buddies in the neighborhood, not that old, very fit guy, end up in the ER and not exactly sure what's going on, but having some health issues. And I was talking to them about that to broaden their perspective, and say, look, we need to be very conscious of the things we do, because the perspective you have should be of a for me, it's eternity, right? But it's an eternity thing. So while the business, say the Kinetic Man is I'm struggling to get more guys in, right? It's a business. It's got to grow. It's got to have income. So say I'm struggling with that and I'm really fighting with that. What keeps me going? let's just sit back and be like, okay, God, is the work we're doing going to have eternal impact? Yes. It can have generational and eternal impact in just a father expressing more love to his son or daughter. That in and of itself can be hugely impactful, not only for generations, but into eternity. So is that's an easy one. Is what I'm doing pleasing to you, Lord? So that's for me, that's big. But it also is the fact that the perspective you have to be conscious of, and this is the part I was talking to my daughter about. I was like, the one guarantee in this life is that we're all going to die.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's an unfortunate thing. And I'm not suggesting that my buddy is on that path. He's in the hospital and they're figuring it out. But at some point he will. And so when I was talking to her, I was like, what is the legacy that I do every single day? What do I leave? What is so from a perspective of eternity, from a perspective of longevity, I have no guarantees for tomorrow. None. I mean, there's no guarantee I don't go fishing and fall in the river and drown right now. Like there's no, and I told her that. I said, honey, I could not come back from fishing. I was like, I'm not trying to be morbid. What I'm trying to do is that perspective is now forcing me to tell you, Maya, that I love you dearly. Your daddy loves you. And so now if I do fall in the river and don't come back, they'll probably find me with a big smile on my face, right? Because I'm in the river. But my daughter now, the last thing I said to her was, hey, life's not guaranteed, but you know that your daddy loves you.
Yeah.
And that's what she went to school with.
Yeah.
And so I think if you think, and I don't always do this, I fail so much, but when I'm really winning in life, it's because my perspective is shaped accordingly. And I'm not making business decisions based on, oh man, I need my bottom line to go up tomorrow. I'm going to go do something else. I quit. No, men are growing. Remember that. Okay. Do I think the rest will be taken care of? Yes. Just keep pressing. Right. My kids, do they know I love them? Does my wife know I cherish her? If not, then you got to fix it. And that perspective has to be for ideally when you're gone, right? What did you leave?
Yeah.
And I don't want to leave a bunch of money. I don't want to leave a bunch of stuff. I want to leave love. I want to leave compassion. I want to leave a legacy of kindness. And so I think your question on perspective it may be one of the most important ones,
Yeah.
most important P's.
Yeah.
Because to your point, it ties it all together, and it can really drive you to continue down that path.
No doubt. Gosh, darn, this is amazing. And when you're saying all that stuff, I'm just like, your purpose. I tell people, you find your purpose when your purpose is greater than yourself. And I really believe that. I really do. I really believe that reason 70% of people are disengaged at work is because they don't see how what they're doing is helping someone else.
Yeah.
They're just going and they're just filling, 8 to 5 in it and checking the box and getting the check and going home. And they don't see a real purpose in how they're making a difference in people's lives. My thing is I want to be a blessing in people's lives. And
100%.
I heard another guy say, I want to be a positive footnote in people's lives.
I love that.
I think it's in business. I think it's in athletics. I think it's a mom or dad. I think it's a son or daughter. How are you being a blessing in someone else's lives? How are you going to 30 years from now? That's why I coached. And hopefully I did it, but I had to cut people. So I probably, in some people's eyes, I probably didn't. But, I wanted to have a relationship with the kids that I coached and taught 30 years from when I coached and taught them. And hopefully in the success that they're having in life, that they're successful husbands or successful fathers, successful business owners, employees, community members, all those different things, that I had a piece of that. Not that I was the main focus of it or nothing, just a piece of it. So 30 years later, they could look back and say, man, I remember Coach White 30 years ago saying this, and it really stuck with me. Maybe it's the fear of regret. Maybe it's whatever it was. The thing that I want people to understand is every single human being has that opportunity to do that.
100%. I love that. I love that.
Life is not an opportunity. I mean, it's not an obligation. It's an opportunity. And every person has an opportunity to be a blessing in people's lives. It could be at the grocery store, standing in line, waiting to get checked out, and you just say something nice to the person next to you. You are a blessing in that person's life right there. Boom. It's as
I'll tell
easy
you,
as
man,
that.
that is a beautiful perspective as well. And it just happened the other day. I was talking, nobody likes calling helplines, whether it's cell phone, whatever, or
Yeah.
complaint lines. And I was surprised. I was taken aback slightly, because now it's just a habit. But I asked the lady who answered, I'm like, "What's your name?" And she's like, she hesitated and she told me her name. I said, I used her name, whatever. Say it's Patricia.
Yeah.
Hey Patricia, how are you today? And she literally stopped and she was like, nobody asks my name and nobody has ever. She said ever. I was like, ever?
Yeah.
She said
No,
nobody
yeah.
has ever asked me how I'm doing. And I was like, well, how are you?
Yeah.
And we talk, but it just is a very, we have so much power, Joe. We have so much power, and we relegate it. And it sounds so cheesy, but people say, are you thriving or surviving?
Yeah.
Get your emotional reaction to the cheesiness of that, and truly ask yourself, are you, like, I can honestly say, and this is not braggadocious, I can honestly say I have so many amazing friends and my life is absolutely thriving. Does that mean every day is great? No. Does that mean my kids are super well behaved? No. Does that mean I am well behaved? No. But I do have a lot of friends, because I'm very intentional about it. They're amazing human beings, and my life is very full. And if you can honestly say that and point to the examples, you're on the path.
Yeah.
And I've not always been on that path, but I can tell you, it is, a lot of times it's a mindset shift. It's a gratitude, like recognizing what you have. It's expressing your thanks. And Joe, I just want to encourage you. There's a book that I did it at risk of appearing to look at my phone. I was looking at my phone, but I was looking up a book. And as a also a podcast host, it irks me when people are looking at their phone doing other things during an interview. So I was not doing that. I was looking up a book. It's
You're
called
good.
The Good Life. The Good Life is written by the two current chairs of the longest study on happiness, the Harvard, I think it's called the Harvard study, the Harvard happiness study. But one thing that really stuck out in that book was one of the happiest people that they kept going back to, that rated super high on happy, was a teacher. It was a teacher. It wasn't some rich dude. Actually, the most unhappy guys were mostly the rich dudes.
Mm-hmm.
It was a teacher like you who invests in others, who coaches, who does it with an intentionality and a purpose that, again, talk about extending generationally or into eternity. I guarantee you there's players that are saying, man, Coach White, and they may not remember Joe White, but they're like, man, I had this coach and he said this thing and it's impacted my life. And I'll even offer that the kids you had to cut, I know you did it in a meaningful, gracious, and loving way. That also probably impacted a ton of them, that put them on a different trajectory.
Well, I appreciate you
Because
saying that.
we often learn from that.
Yeah, I hope so. Um, I just kind of have a saying. You make your day better when you can make someone else's day better.
Yeah,
And
huge.
I do the same thing when I talk to the service people on the phone. There'll be times I'm like, I just want to tell you something, and they're like, yes. I'm like, you are awesome. You were great at what you did today.
Everybody loves that, right?
Thank you so much for helping me today. I was really frustrated going into this. And I just want to tell you, you were awesome. And it does.
Yeah,
It
I love
flips
that.
them out. I used to tell my classes all the time, I want you to try something today. Next time you go out to eat, and we can tell our podcast listeners this, next time you go out to eat and you have pretty good service and everything else, ask to see the manager. Okay. Well,
Love that, dude. I love that.
the manager will come, and of course the manager is thinking, uh-oh, what now? And they're coming defense is ready to go and everything. And you look at the manager and say, I just want to tell you that this server was the best server I've ever had in my life. This was awesome. The food was great, but the server was just, I just wanted to tell you how great the server was. It makes
So good.
their day the best day they've ever had in their life because they're
It's
so
huge.
used to people coming at them. And it's easy to do. And the way you feel afterwards is great too, because you just pick someone else up.
Yeah.
And David, I this has been more than I even expected. I expected something huge today, and this has been just awesome. We've gone way over an hour, so I hope people can listen for over an hour. But we might have to do episode 2. I appreciate you more than you know, and we haven't known each other for that long. But I was mesmerized with a lot of things that you were saying today. And I just thank you. Thank you for inspiring others. Thank you for helping others. Thank you for serving others. Thank you for serving our country. Thank you for showing us the way. And I know that this is not the last time you and I are going to talk. And just thank you for coming on our podcast today. You inspired a lot of people.
Hey, thank you, Joe. I really appreciate it. Appreciate you using your platform for just such an amazing purpose, man. You're an inspiration, and it's been great to get to know you. And I agree. This is not the last of our interaction. And I just thank you to your listeners for just for the opportunity and man, keep it up, keep crushing. I love the impact, and I say this all the time to our guests, but I'll say it to you. You will truly not understand the impact you're making until you get to heaven. Like you just won't. You just don't know
Wow.
the number of listeners that you have that are being impacted by your wisdom or just the fact that you're willing to do this and put out amazing content, put out positive content, life-giving growth content. You will not know until you get to heaven the number of people that you truly impacted. So
Wow.
thank you.
Well, that's powerful too. I thank you, and thank you all for listening. I knew this was going to be great, and it was. Thank you for listening to our podcast. Share it, help down. I don't know anything about any of that stuff. I just do it to help inspire people. But let's keep growing it. And as I always say to you on the last thing before we go is please, please, please keep progressing and have a great week. Thank you so much for listening.